And then we're going to go here and see if it works. Okay. That looks like it's loading. So we can do this without me. I'm just going to sit here and try. Can you hear my voice? On the
I hear you fine. Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay. All right, here we go. I'm going to go public, even though I can't talk, which is not a big deal. All right, we're going public now. Let me go find it here somewhere on YouTube.
All right. See if we can figure this out at some point. Greetings, humans, if you're there. A little problem with the technical issues, of course. I'm sure. Thanks for coming by. Sorry for the technical glitch at the top. I'm Bob Harris. Emil's still having some technical glitches. Can't quite hear us, but I'll go ahead and carry on. And wait for some questions. I know we had some questions in the last one that I did not get to, so please feel free to hit me again in the chat if you so desire, and I will be watching there. It's an interesting day. More of the teams starting to ramp up and actually hitting the practice field. We're starting to get a little bit of actual intelligence, so to speak, from the teams. DeAndre Hopkins wants to be Kyler Murray's best friend. I mean, we want to hear that, right? Le'Veon Bell's down at his lightest weight since high school. We want to hear that. These are the kind of things we want to know. Even if it's just like a narrow band, we're starving for information. We're starting to get it. Some interesting chatter with the Colts backfield, the Dolphins backfield, the San Francisco 49ers backfield. So as I'm waiting for questions, I'll probably address some of those issues as we go along. And maybe Emil will even figure out his sound issues, and we'll get everything rolling 100%. So in the meantime, I thought it was interesting, over the course of the last few days, the Cleveland Browns situation. In particular, a local reporter kind of threw out some speculation that maybe a 50-50 split between Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, maybe 15 carries each game would be a good idea. I'm not sure Kevin Stefanski is going to be buying into that. Not really a style. I do think both backs will be used, but obviously if it was a 50-50 split, 15 carries apiece, that would not be what people are drafting Nick Chubb to be, right? We're drafting him to be, right at the 12, right around 12 ADP right now. So interesting situation there that we're going to have to keep an eye on because, if history tells us something, it's that Kevin Stefanski, it's going to be a very run-heavy attack. And so we'll have to deal with it. Well, we're going to have to divine some of these situations. Look, there's a number of these backfields, whether it's Cleveland, whether it's Washington, a lot to dig through there. New England, a lot of mysteries. Indianapolis of more interest. Marlon Mack, pretty much Frank Reich named the starter. Is that just the veteran getting the nod for now until Jonathan Taylor proves something? That seems likely. San Francisco, as I mentioned, Miami, we have some news on. So plenty to grind through as we get into this, but looking forward to taking some of your questions. Just pop them into the chat.
I can hear again.
Emil can hear and I can hear him, so that's always a good start.
That was a heck of a crash. I hadn't had my main computer do that.
All right, so that was kind of the glitch in the Matrix at the beginning, the mighty computer crash. They do that, people. You'll be surprised to learn. Those of you who have never used a computer, they do that. So anyhow, thanks for coming by. We're going to do this kind of stuff every day throughout the week. We kind of have a plan to do a couple mock drafts each week. Those will be on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think tomorrow Emil has a auction draft we're probably going to go through and kind of comment on and take your questions and see what's up with that and kind of get a feel for the values. We have a great article in the Pro Forecast every year by Brad Cruz, a renowned auction player, and we have a cheat sheet with all his values. And I noticed I covered the Flex draft for Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. last weekend, and found out that the values he has in his sheet are pretty good, Emil. He has the initial bid offer and then the high price. And I think all those numbers work pretty well. It was a pretty toned down auction. We'll see how yours is tomorrow. In the meantime, go ahead and throw us out any questions. And we'll kind of dig into a couple things, Emil. I mentioned at the top, the running back situations. And, look, I've been using Fantasy Calculator. Their kind of initial, they have really quick, last 3 day kind of ADP. We also have full ADP on our site. But I like to see the fluctuations in the narrow band of time. And the Clyde Edwards-Helaire fluctuations have not been there. He's just rocketed up to number 6, and there he is sat. And I know we've talked about this before, but is that a price you're interested in paying for him?
And I'm starting to wonder, with Andy Reid's history of rookies, you hate to go against that. But, God, it's just so hard to see a guy. I was 9th last night in our live mock draft, PPR, and he went 8th. I didn't even get a shot at him.
Yeah, so, I think that's what we're going to find as we go along, that if you want him, that 6th spot. It's interesting, over the course of the last few days, saw some guys fall down a little bit, like Ezekiel Elliott's fluctuated a bit in that first round. I've seen him as low as 8 in the last few days. He's back up to 3 today. So interesting to see the fluctuations. But most of these guys, like Edwards-Helaire, has just rocketed up and been locked in. So if you're out there and if you're drafting him, I get a lot of questions about the handcuff. And DeAndre Washington seems like the guy, everybody. Talked to Pete Sweeney from Arrowhead Pride last weekend on SiriusXM NFL channel. And he said, that he thought that before they drafted Edwards-Helaire, that Washington was a guy who was going to push for playing time, push Damian Williams for playing time, and maybe cut into his workload some. And who knows? The Chiefs feel like he's capable of carrying the load. We saw it late last season when Josh Jacobs was hurt in Oakland. They leaned heavily on Washington. So is that worthy of a handcuff? Is that enough information for you to make him a handcuff, Emil, or is he just kind of a best ball stab in the late rounds for you?
When you're going to spend a first-round pick on Edwards-Helaire and you can get DeAndre Washington, 10th, 11th, 12th round, depending on how the AP is going to be moving in the next week or two, it's worth it to me. Absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I think, we look at the range of handcuffs. They do have a couple other guys, right? So I'm not selling them short there. But he's been the next back off. It's going about the 1308 right now. I'm guessing that will climb in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for that. Actually, LaShawn McCoy is going ahead of him, but still not in KC, so he's in Tampa Bay now. So, I think it's interesting, though, how fast Edwards-Helaire shot up as soon as Damian Williams opted out. I mean, it's not a surprise. That's kind of what we do as fantasy owners. We react quickly. We want to leverage these moments, these momentary surges, and take advantage of them. And we saw it in leagues I was drafting in, immediately, as you would expect. And I mean, I think we see a lot of these reactions almost in real time when you're drafting. I'm drafting in a number of best balls at any moment, and you'll see a news item happen, and all of a sudden that guy will get drafted, or the guy who also has an impact will get drafted. So I do think Edwards-Helaire, if you want him, he's worthwhile. We're drafting him at his ceiling. We draft a lot of guys at their ceiling. We just haven't seen him do the job yet. And that's kind of the concern. But also, Sweeney feels like he's going to come in and get the immediate starting role, and that's what we're after. And again, if you have any questions, put them up in the chat. Be happy to hear what you have to say. Happy to hear your thoughts on Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
And
or any of these
Thompson,
guys.
Again, is a second-year running back, which is nice because they have a little time to get some experience and get used to the NFL, who did almost nothing last year. And you can get him even later than Washington. The reason we like DeAndre Washington is he's had the experience. You've seen him. He can come into a team, and they don't have to train him to be prepared to play.
Yeah, he's a solid receiver too. Filled in really well for Josh Jacobs last year. It was a 3-game stretch where he got feature back workload, and I think that was pretty impressive and probably something the Chiefs saw as well. I mentioned the whole Cleveland Browns, the Nick Chubb, been a lot of consternation. If you followed along last year, or if you were a Chubb owner, you know that his numbers tailed off noticeably once Kareem Hunt came back, but he was still a top 15 running back, right? It wasn't like, he had been going great guns before that. He's an amazing runner after contact. They've upgraded the offensive line. They bring in a coach who uses that zone blocking scheme. We saw it in Minnesota last year and the impact it had on Dalvin Cook and pretty much whoever ran in that backfield. So really the limited concern on Nick Chubb right now is going to be Kareem Hunt's presence. Right now, Nick Chubb, 12th running back off the board, 1203. And I know that people in PPR leagues feel like that he's devalued a little bit there. How do you feel about him, Emil?
I'm kind of worried. I'm kind of worried about him. The problem with Cleveland in general is they had this incredible talent, and they had Hooper at tight end. They've got to start scoring more. If they can start scoring, and I don't want to mention Kansas City because that's an incredible, but they failed a lot, and perhaps it's Baker Mayfield's fault, and of course the coaching staff that's changed. They got to score more to get both those running backs productive. I'm just looking right now last year at Hunt, and he came in week 10 all the way to week 15, he scored 14, 11, 12, 17, 14, 15. He scored 8 in week 16 and didn't do much the next week. And Chubb, of course, he had a huge game in week 12. He scored 25 fantasy points against Miami. And then in week 15, he scored 23. His lows were 8, 12, and 4. And if they can start scoring more as a team, I'm not too worried about it. But it also tells me that perhaps Hunt's a pretty good late pick.
Not all that late. Not all that late anymore.
It's not. He's getting higher. I want to look at his ADP.
Right. He's fifth round, 27th back off the board right now, going in the 5th round. So you're paying a premium. He's kind of viewed as a standalone play, I think, by most people for the reasons you stated. Yeah, and he should. I mean, you don't want to pay that premium on a handcuff. I have a couple questions in the chat, and I'll get to you, Greg, in just a minute. I want to talk to Tsunami 415, wanting to know where Cam Newton should go. Look, I think current ADP has him as the 14th quarterback off the board. It's about a 10th round play. He's right after Matthew Stafford, ahead of Daniel Jones. I like both those guys better than I like Cam. Ben Roethlisberger, Baker Mayfield, Joe Burrow coming off in the next range. Jared Goff, Ryan Tannehill, the 20th quarterback off the board. That to me is a better gamble than Cam Newton. But if you want Cam, look, I think when you were drafting him, two things. He's not guaranteed to start right now. I mean, we all think he's going to start, and I'm like 100% sure, but I'd like to see how it plays out before I start investing like that. But if you want to invest now, I think you're going to have to draft him probably as your QB2, a high-end QB2, maybe a steadier quarterback first. Or, as I mentioned, you could draft Cam a little bit early and then still get a very viable quarterback too, and if you want to view Cam as your starter, who can come in and carry the load for you if need be.
That's an excellent point. And also, we finally on our site we have ADP and we have ESPN, Best Ball, Low Stakes, and we also got High Stakes that finally came in the last week or two, and we have Newton is 17th quarterback, and Tannehill's the 23rd. So if you wanted to go crazy, you could take Newton and then take Tannehill and have extreme value there with some risk.
Yeah, I think so as well. Greg, enjoyed. Thanks for the mock last night. Looking at the upside on Moss and Dillon, I think it's Moss. I talked to Mike Schopp from WGR in Buffalo Saturday, and he's quite a fantasy player. He's in a league with me in the current 50-round mock draft, or 50-round dynasty draft. 32 teams. 2 copies of each player, 50 rounds. It's a huge draft, full IDP. But anyway, Mike, came on our program on SiriusXM NFL Radio and said Moss is the only Buffalo Bill he's drafting. This is a guy who covers the Bills on a daily basis. He loves the value. So I think he thinks Moss will get the Frank Gore role and maybe do a little more with it. And so that's why he's drafting him. Look, you can make the argument that maybe, and I think Mike Schopp would, that the other assets are a little higher priced. It's not like he would never draft them. He's just looking for the value, so he finds it. Moss. I mean, in Dillon's case, you've got a couple guys ahead of him, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. We'll see if Williams holds on to that. But I think right now Moss has the clear path to workload. Paul Nardone.
Zach Moss is the 43rd running back taken in High Stakes, according to our date on our site. That's pretty low. That's a value player.
Yeah, for a guy that comes in with a pretty clear role, right? I mean, that's the key for me. I'm not sure what Dylan's role is yet. Maybe that changes over the coming week or two. Entirely possible. So Paul Nardone wants to know what percentage of best ball leagues are set and forget variety. And it looks like you have a best ball for year. So the scoring is best ball only, but you have waiver wires and trades. None of the best balls I'm in do that. So for me, it's 100%. I play on best ball 10s. And might play a little bit on DraftKings here. There's a new site called Underdog that I'll be using. But when I play best ball, it's only best ball. It's set and forget. You draft, and that's all you do. Emil, are you playing in any?
I think best ball is defined by that. If you have free agency and lineups, well, I guess you could hybrid it a little bit.
So says the inventor of best ball, everybody.
Yes.
So Emil Kadlec, by the way, was the guy who first came up with the best ball format a few years back. One day we'll maybe tell that story here in the FanX League. Great work by him. And, man, it's really taken hold. I love playing it. It's like mock drafting except with something on the line. And I think, there are some subtle differences in strategy, but I think early in drafts that they tend to go pretty much the same. So, hey, Kirk, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming by. So which Miami running back do you want to roster? So, Emil, I think for me this has been a situation. We got a little tidbit yesterday. It was Cameron Wolf from ESPN reported he expects like a 50% share for Jordan Howard, maybe a 35% share for Matt Breida. And so, based on that, maybe it depends, Kirk, on roster construction. If I'm looking, if I need just a guy with the heavier path to workload and I'm not looking for a ton of upside, maybe that's the place where I plug in Jordan Howard. I think they're both going off in the middle of the 7th round right now. So just a couple picks apart. So I think it's pretty, you can make this choice pretty easy. And if you're built for, you already have the clear path to workloads, maybe you go with the big play threat in Breida. Emil, how would you handle it?
Pardon? Did you ask me?
How would you handle the Miami backfield?
Yeah, I wish Breida was a little lower a few weeks ago. He's, like you said, they're almost right next to each other.
Right. He's got that big play
if I
ability.
could get value out of Breida and take him later, but I've got to take him about the same time I take Howard. So I don't like Howard for some reason, but that's probably just an emotional thing, which I should ignore.
Yeah, I think one of the issues, in Chan Gailey's offense is kind of a spread offense, and we're expecting him to use, we think that Matt Breida would be a great fit for that kind of thing. But it still sounds like, though, you get plenty of usage out of Jordan Howard. So Kirk, I think that's how I'd approach it. It just depends on how my roster construction is, since they're both the same price. I tend to agree, Todd Ullman, Howard always undervalued. I think he tends to be in this case. I thought there should be a little more separation, like Emil, between Howard and Breida, and there was a little earlier in the draft season, but right now they are neck and neck, and be interested to see how this offense plays out. Chan Gailey comes in. The last time we saw him, in I think it was 2016, coaching the Jets. Matt Forte got the bulk of the carries and not as many catches as he got, prior to that. And then Bilal Powell came in and kind of turned into the receiving back. But it was a similar share to what the prediction is by Cameron Wolf, basically, is kind of that 50-30 split with a couple other guys kicking in. I'd like to think the Dolphins will be playing from behind because I don't know about you guys. Chime in there, Kurt, and any of you guys in the chat, but I kind of feel like, I'm not really worried which quarterback it is. I think it was Ryan Fitzpatrick. We saw what he could do last year. Tua seems like a guy who could probably chuck it and get it down. That begs the question, though. How confident are we in Devontae Parker duplicating last year's performance or just some semblance of it? You're not paying for it right now, which I think is a great deal. I always love it when I'm getting a discount. And we are getting a discount on him. Checking the ADP real quick. He is coming off the board.
Go ahead.
Yeah, he's coming off the board. 29th receiver off the board, 609. Right now it's A.J. Green, Marquise Brown, Devontae Parker. They're all coming off after Stephon Diggs, which kind of surprises me. Maybe I've just got a blind spot there, Emil.
No, it's interesting. It's again, you're trying to predict the future. Parker was a guy we couldn't trust for how many years? We just couldn't trust him, and all of a sudden, he was a top 5 wide receiver in the second half, especially after Preston Williams went down. If this guy can just be 80% of what he was, the value at his ADP is hard to pass up. And the other question, the interesting point you made is if Miami is going to be behind a lot, do you think that favors Breida over Howard in your decision making?
Yeah, it may well, right? And Kurt saying it. Parker killed us every year until last year, and boy, he just came on. How much of that is Brian Flores comes in, new culture, new coaching staff, and a lot of the reporting was that Parker finally got it and figured out how to put all the pieces together. We kept hearing this under Gaze and previous to this where he was not quite getting he would didn't have the diet right, didn't have the workouts right, didn't have his sleep right. Then last year it all seemed to come together. And maybe, I suspect, secretly, Brian Flores is kicking everybody's ass there on a regular basis, kind of that Belichickian approach that he brings from New England. And look, I think that was a great coaching hire, and I think it's going to pay off over time. But yes, as Todd says, one-year success guys are kind of scary. And by kind of totally. So it's him and Williams. I think they're good investments. Maybe you wait and get the cheaper asset. I just think Parker is so fairly priced right now that I have a ton of shares of him in best ball.
Oh, do you? Good.
Yeah, Brett Perriman, I'm not getting a ton of shares of. Now that he's with New York. That was like a 3-game sample, Todd. I don't know. He had a narrow band in Tampa Bay. And that Chuck and Duck offense, no risk it, no biscuit. Gesicki is a guy that Gesicki coming off a nice stretch. Look, he's a good fit. He ran more routes out of the receiver spot than most tight ends. And I think that'll continue going forward, right? I mean, with Chan Gailey, he's going to run those 3 and 4 receiver sets. Could see Gesicki as the big slot a lot. Not a great blocker, so they can split him out and take advantage of his athleticism. I think he's one of that range of tight ends. And we'll talk about those tight ends that we all love down as we get down into that top 12.
Looking at the high stakes, which I like to look at a lot. Of course, we have the various ones depending on the kind of leagues you're in. But right now, Mike Gesicki is the 10th tight end taken, which is, that's pretty late. You can get value out of him. And, Higbee is a guy I like who right now is going at 6th in these high stakes leagues. And who of course played incredible last year with the Rams whenever it went down. We talked about him last night in the draft. I took him in the draft. I feel like there's some more guys late this year that have potential just at tight end. You got Rob Gronkowski. You can talk about the news about him. It's a scary guy, but high potential there in Tampa Bay if he truly is healthy. Noah Fant for Denver is an ultra late guy. Jonnu Smith is the 7th tight end taken. He could end up being a top 6, top 7 tight end this year. And I didn't even mention Doyle yet. And you got Chris Herndon.
There's my guy.
Tell us about Doyle.
Doyle, I mean, you look at this Colts passing attack. I mean, it's designed to go through the tight end, very tight end heavy targets. Last year, once Eric Ebron was gone, the targets went sky high for Doyle. I think he's a guy that's crazy late. There's a high floor play. And some of these other guys we're talking about, and hey, Bloom and Cookie, thanks for comment. I'll get to that question. But Todd Ullman just asked about Herndon. I think there's a whole range of guys in that price range that, I mean, if you buy it on them and they don't work out, you can move on. I think there's going to be other fish in the sea in that same range. Ian Thomas is a guy that I don't see drafted all the time. TJ Hawkinson. I mean, there's a whole mess of them, and I think a lot of people are going to be drafting the Hayden Hurst, the Tyler Higbees, kind of the flashy guys. And look, not without reason, but they're no more proven, I don't think. I mean, look, Higbee had a great 5-run stretch. It was almost historic. It was 100 yards a game almost. But he was putting up wide receiver 1 numbers during that stretch of games. But I think for the most part, you're paying a little high for that for a guy that hasn't yet proven it. So I'm kind of staying away from that mid-range of guys for the most part, and either getting the early tier or getting the way late tier so I can feel like I could scream and move on. And Bloom and Cookie, you also wanted to know about the defenses being further ahead when the offenses when the game starts. I don't know. I've heard a lot of opinions, talked to a lot of people about this. That's kind of like the instinctive feel for me is, but I think some people that I've been talking to and some pretty smart people, Casey Joyner, the football scientist, thinks the offenses will be way ahead and the defenses will be scrambling to keep up. And I love to hear that because I'm so invested in Daniel Jones, and his early schedule is such a murderer's row that I'm hoping that's the case. But, opinion is mixed, and I think it's going to be hard for us to tell. This is such a unique year, and something I've noticed in recent years, because hardly anyone plays in the preseason, none of the starters do. It's like September has become the new August, right? They're still working through things. So hell, this year, November might be the new September, right? I mean, it might take a while for everyone to get on track. So we may have a level of volatility we haven't experienced before. Yeah. And my defensive sleeper, whoever has the latest bye. Hello, Tampa Bay.
Back to Herndon real quick. A few extra things about him. He played, I don't even think he played last year, and he had a pad person problem. Didn't he come out a few months ago saying, hey, he kind of realized he was out there and he needed to clean his act up?
Yeah, well, he had the suspension. He came off that. It was for a DUI. Then he got injured while he was working out to come back from the suspension. We never really saw him. I mean, we've been hoping he turns into a thing now for quite some time. He has yet to turn into a thing. I mean, if I'm drafting 2 tight ends, and doubling up, and I have someone who I feel confident can get the job done until I can find out what Herndon is, and I just want to keep him as a placeholder. Yeah.
Well, that's that my point. You really need him as a second tight end. You need to have a league where you can draft deep enough that where you can take him as a late round last player taken, and that means you're going to have 2 tight ends. And if you can't do that, I think he's too risky. And there's a lot of guys you can get, and then week 1, 2, or 3, be ready to see if he starts to emerge. Because let me go look at his ADP. I don't even know if he's there. Oh, he's actually
he's not. He's off the board, right? So
20th ADP. So
right. So interesting. Kurt Pukes is talking about Crowder and Mims. Crowder's one of my favorite players in the draft. I mean, 10th round ADP, a guy that's that heavily targeted is exactly the kind of player I'm looking for. And last year he was targeted a fair amount in the red zone. So I think he's it's not a good offense, right? So that's the concern there. But in general, I really like Jamison Crowder. I like the way they used him last year.
He definitely got a lot of targets last year. It was impressive. Let me go look real quick. I hadn't popped that up yet, but he had 122 targets and 78 catches.
Yeah, there was one game where he targeted like 14 times. I mean, it was ridiculous. He had some ridiculous games, and it got some work in the red zone as well.
Well, here's his problem. His problem is his floor is very low. He had a 3-game, a 2-game, a 5-game, sandwiched by a 19, 18, and a 27. So sounds like a good best ball player over anything else.
Yeah, I have a ton of them. Greg Link wants to hear about the Saints offense. We expect it to be more balanced this year with Alvin Kamara healthy. No, I expect it. Well, balanced is a funny thing. I mean, they like to run the ball when they can because their defense is playing better. And when they can't, they're more than happy throwing it, and even then they're more than happy throwing it. So I think Alvin Kamara is going to have better numbers. I think the touchdowns are going to at least return to a reasonable level. Wouldn't surprise me if he hit double digits or close to that after the 6 TDs last year being unhealthy. I think the interesting thing there is going to see if Emmanuel Sanders can carve out a role, and does it come at the expense of Jared Cook? Because I don't think it's coming at the expense of Michael Thomas, and neither does anyone else drafting Michael Thomas. Quick question on Ezekiel Elliott, and this is a good point. I mean, we're in the COVID world. Would we raise him because he has already had COVID? 2 things. We're not sure how long the antibodies, are good for. So, I mean, in general, yes. I mean, all things being equal, yeah. But I don't think I raise him any higher than 3, and I haven't moved him any lower than 3. Although, real weirdly this week, I know on Fantasy Calculator his ADP was all over the place. He's back up to 3, but there was a stretch late last week where he was down to 8. I'm thinking, man, how can I get in one of those drafts? Where I might get Ezekiel Elliott as the 8th player off the board, but not getting him there anymore. But yeah. So I mean, if I was having a hard time deciding between Ezekiel Elliott and maybe Dalvin Cook, in that 3-4 range, maybe that would be a hair splitter. But I don't think I'm in hair-splitting mode with Zeke anymore. He's locked in as 3 for me. Any thoughts on that for you, Emil?
Well, I think it's easy to forget about that, and you're getting into your emotion of drafting. I think you really should think about the virus. As if he missing it 2 weeks is a big deal, but I don't know how high you move him. It's he's
that's
pretty
the problem
high
for
there
me.
already. So
it's pretty much baked in, and I mean, maybe it's just you take the happy positive that you feel like, okay, maybe he's got the antibodies for a while. And again, we're not sure how long that works, or
if I had the
there's a lot we
number
don't
one draft pick, am I really going to skip Christian McCaffrey and take Elliott? I guess I should consider that, but I probably wouldn't.
I'm not.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, I'm not considering that. Question here is Eric Ebron a sleeper with Ben back? I think everyone in that offense is, I pointed out yesterday during a mock draft, the Steelers threw for 1,960 fewer yards last season with Big Ben out, thanks to the mighty Duck, Hodges, and Mason Rudolph. So, I have pretty high expectations for these guys in general. So I think guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, I think Ebron's been a best ball play for me, a guy that I'm taking very late. And I'm happy to, especially in best ball. I think he's an ideal best ball play. Not sure what I expect from him, week in, week out, but I think there will be huge games, just like Ben has huge games.
I can get him real late.
Yeah, he's dirt cheap. And again, some of these things may depend on your roster construction. Again, as I mentioned earlier when Kurt asked about the Miami running backs. I mean, it's possible you just, it may depend on how your roster. If you have a high floor guy, maybe you want an upside play if you're going too deep at the onesie positions, or even in best ball, if you're going 3 deep, you can easily get Ebron as your third tight end there. I don't know why you would, because Will Dissly is still going to be available. And if you're not drafting him, you're nuts. Just kidding. Fire the dismissal. Love that guy.
Who gets hurt without even having contact, which is scary.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That's my history, though. I'm always drafting a tight end that's going to get hurt way before he ever produces as much as I think.
He's tempting.
That way I can't be wrong. If they get hurt early, I'm like, well, he would have been as great as I said he was going to be.
Let's see if we project those stats over 16 weeks.
If you projected his stats over 16 weeks, it'd be the best season for a tight end ever in the history of the game.
Possibly, but maybe we won't run those numbers.
Probably not. But I will be firing the dismissal. It's best balls. Riggs and Edwards and Ruggs. I'm probably leaning Ruggs. Right now, I mean, it does sound like Edwards is going to have a role. Talking about him playing the X. Tyrell Williams says his feet feel better. So, and he was pretty effective last year, kind of thrust into that receiver 1 role unexpectedly, at least for the first 5 games, scoring a touchdown a week and putting up good numbers. But, it's a pretty crowded field. So I think I'm going to keep it at the upper end of this. I mean, I'm not against some best ball shares of Edwards, but I'm probably focused on Ruggs. And I think it seems like his ADP has been rising accordingly. Just take a quick check here in the last day or two. Yeah, he's coming off at 909. He's ahead of Darius Slayton. He's ahead of Jerry Jeudy. He's ahead of Jameson Crowder. He's ahead of a lot of guys he used to not be ahead of. And I think some of it is that video on Twitter of him making that one-handed catch. Again, we get to see so little of these guys that this season that I think a lot of us are biting hard when we get these little tidbits that are floating around out there.
Emotion over logic, which a lot of us.
I think when we're connecting the dots, and we don't have as many dots, but we have a couple dots. And that's the thing. We know his draft position. He's the first wide receiver taken. We know Mark Davis didn't want any other player, and channeling his dad, and I think we all think of some of the failed speedsters that have showed up in Oakland. I think Ruggs is a little different than that. He's kind of that, kind of a little more well-rounded. I don't think he's just a deep threat. I think we're going to see a ton of him in, jet sweeps, bubble screens, give him some opportunities to make some plays with his running ability and playmaking ability. So,
well, of course, Edwards is a really good dynasty player, obviously.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think he kind of was undervalued. He's coming off the foot injury, so final year of college wasn't as good as it could have been. So I mean, I do think there's some value there. I just don't know if we're going to see it this year. Maybe you guys could chime in if you're, are you dialing back on rookies just in general, or guys who have made moves just because it's an unusual offseason? I talked a little earlier about DeAndre Hopkins, making best friends with Kyler Murray, as you would expect him to. But I mean, are we a little worried about some of these guys? I feel like DeAndre Hopkins is coming off boards a little later than certainly later than he would have before. And so I'm just thinking, like, people are dialing back a little bit. Maybe there's a way to leverage that into your favor if you have a lot of confidence in a guy. But I think I think I have some concerns, especially about the rookies coming right in at wide receiver and making an immediate contribution. Even the guys I really like Justin Jefferson, I was really keen on. I think he goes into a good spot. Yeah, Kirk mentioning Hopkins is special, not staying away. Look, he should still get a ton of targets too. It's a high volume offense, but you've noticed that he's fallen down the list. I mean, how high, Kurt, are you willing to draft him? He's going off as wide receiver 5 right now. Would you take him ahead of Jones, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams? What's your range there? I'd be
waiting
interested
for Kurt to answer that question. His previous thing about taking Edwards as a flyer in the 18th or 19th, and I think that's a really smart idea. In the deep leagues like the high stakes, Edwards makes sense as your last player taken, other than a defense or a place kicker.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Outlook for Chubb in Cleveland, we kind of went through this. I mean, he's currently going off at 12. I think, look, if you're in a PPR league, there's a lot of reasons to like other guys more. The chatter the last couple of days has been maybe more even split. I don't know that I buy that. I think it's easy to overlook how good of a runner Chubb is, how great he's been over contact since he turned pro, his playmaking ability. So, I mean, I'm still okay with him at 12, but I understand why people are dialing back. And again, we talked about Hunt going off in about round 5 as a standalone play in PPR makes perfect sense as well. Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that's right where he should go, Kurt. I think that's exactly right. Next question is there a mid to late round QB you like with a bad defense and a good offense that will allow for lots of fantasy points through the air? Yes. Go ahead, Emil. Go ahead and throw them out there.
A couple. Just the one that jumps out at me is probably why Matthew Stafford has scored so much, is they seem to always be behind. Yes. And that's always the worry about that team, is the running backs never really get a good shake unless they're a pass-catching running back. It may change a little this year, but he's definitely high on that list. And Wentz is kind of there too, but we're not 100% on that.
Yeah, I think Wentz is probably the safer play. In Stafford, maybe we're a little worried about the injuries, but the numbers were crazy good last year in the 8 games he played. A lot of top 5 finishes in those 8 games. So, and I think he averaged over 20 points a game, which is kind of what I'm looking for as a starting quarterback. And he's available, into the double-digit rounds in a lot of drafts. So watch for him.
Daniel Jones for the Giants, he didn't play a lot of games, but they were behind a lot. And do you think the Giants are going to be behind a lot this year?
Yeah, I do. And I think, I'm drafting in a lot of leagues. I'm taking Jones and Matthew Stafford, one after the other, maybe reaching up for Jones for that upside, taking Stafford because I feel like it's a solid high floor. The concern with Jones is obviously the schedule is not great early on. And so that's concerned. And also they play Baltimore week 16, which isn't like necessarily the best situation. But I do think there's a lot to like about Daniel Jones, especially the high-end games he had last year and the supporting cast around him I like as well.
Well, match him up. And we also have a quarterback matchup on Football Diehards. If you're worried about 16 and you're worried about the beginning, you can get Daniel late, and you can take somebody else in that area. Even Tannehill, I haven't looked at the matchup, but there's guys you can take. If you can have 2 quarterbacks in the size of your league, you could solve those problems. And whoever mentioned worrying about the defense and the offense for the quarterback is a good point. You don't want your quarterback getting killed, but certainly when you're behind, the quarterback's going to be throwing the ball. And if you can take that into consideration, it's a very smart idea.
Yeah, I think the schedule is a little bit of a worry in some of these guys too. But again, as we talked about in the earlier question, I'm not sure how the defenses are going to come out of the chute, but it's a pretty rough stretch for Danny Dimes early on. Maybe, I've had some people I've talked to say, well, I'm probably not going to draft him. I think the owner, whoever drafts him, will dump him after a couple games with that tough schedule, and I'll be able to pick him up as a free agent. I don't know. I'm more into reaching up for guys that I think have a high ceiling. And look, he was great and has a great supporting cast. So
Well, he is actually a little higher than you'd expect. High stakes, he's at 12. So
yeah, I think that's a fair place for him. Honestly, I think I have him at 10, so I'm a little higher than most. Well, the one that baffles me, though, and maybe everyone out there in the chat world here can tell me this: is Ryan Tannehill feared because of the offense? I mean, is it just we think it's such a run-heavy offense, and that he was so efficient down the stretch when he was like a top 5 quarterback a number of weeks in a row? And A.J. Brown was really good, so. Just interesting to me that nobody drafts him. I see him going off. He's currently 20 in ADP. So that late season run he had was pretty phenomenal. A.J. Brown also pretty phenomenal. So just always curious about that. I started drafting Tannehill more as I realized that a lot of drafts were ending and nobody had drafted him. I said, what the hell? Somebody should have drafted him. Question from Kurt. Do you think J.K. Dobbins becomes the back at some point this year, or will we see a split? I think he will, but until then, we'll see a split. So, Emil, you have any thoughts on that one? I think Emil has frozen. Possible. Emil has frozen. I think I am not frozen, though, so I'll just keep going on. And I do think Dobbins will come on at some point. And so I just did a dynasty startup, and I took Dobbins fairly early, Kurt. And I came back around, and Ingram was still hanging around there, and I got him as my running back 3. I think in a dynasty, that's a fair approach. In redraft, I think it's going to be trickier to get both of them. I think people are paying a pretty good premium for Dobbins on the expectation. It's a great rushing, it's a great rushing offense, right? I mean, we want a piece of that, and we see a talented youngster coming in. I just don't know that Ingram is done. So I've kind of been dialing back a little bit on both of them. I liked it earlier in the year when I was getting Dobbins, 7th, 8th round. Where's he going right now? I mean, it just seems like the price has climbed a little bit to the point, or maybe I'm just at the point where I feel like I'm already saturated. Just checking the ADP right now. He's in the 6th round now. So I think I was getting him in 7 and 8. I was a little happier with it, but that's not a ridiculous price. Where are you at on the paying for him, Kurt? I'd be interested to know where your feeling is. I totally agree with that, Kurt. I mean, that's why I've been drafting him, and that's why I invested heavily in him early. I feel like he is one of those guys that's going to be a league winner. And late 6 is good for me. Same thing about Jonathan Taylor. So right after the draft, I was all in. I think he's in a great spot. I think it's like a perfect offense. I think he's going to take over for Marlon Mack, but then we hear again today, that Mack is going to be the starter early on. Are you guys buying into that notion that it's really, not Jonathan Taylor's job, or that he'll need some time to get into it? Because I don't know. I'm feeling like if Marlon Mack, they really believed he was the guy, Jonathan Taylor would not be on this team. He just seems like so ideally built for this offense. It may take him some time to get going. And Nyheim Hines could be a limiting factor for both of them. So running back 3 with upside sounds about right. Some other backfields I'm just curious if anyone has any thoughts on as well. The San Francisco backfield, we're hearing a lot of buzz about Jerick McKinnon. He's a guy I had started investing in a couple weeks ago, like as a really late best ball guy. Let's see where he's moved up to. And then we're hearing, Matt Barrows from The Athletic is suggesting he doesn't think necessarily Mostert should be viewed as the starter. He said Tevin Coleman started every game last year, which is true. But Mostert had a great run. Are we overlooking Tevin Coleman, an 8th round flyer there? McKinnon right now, I'm trying to see where he's going at. 14th round. I like the cheap pieces, and boy, the buzz on McKinnon is getting ridiculous the last week. Anyone else buying into that? Am I the only one? Damn it, I hate that. Anyone else feel like Mostert is going way too high? Why not, Kurt? Just in general, I mean, with the 14th round, I'm curious. Is there anybody there? Maybe that's the better question. Is there anyone there you feel you're drafting with confidence in San Francisco? Because I feel like that's kind of where I'm at, Kurt. I've kind of liked him. I probably have more shares of him. I'm just adding the McKinnon the last couple of weeks, and it's been crazy late. But Mostert, for a while when he demanded the trade, he fell down into like round 8 or so, and it seemed like a pretty good price. Now it seems like he's climbed back up into the 5th round. I'm going, not so much. See if Emil's coming back there. Emil? Not quite back. Yeah, McKinnon late, I think, the money they paid to get him, and I know the knee has been an issue and could be an ongoing issue, right? But he is hanging in there. But yeah, I think, he was a piece they really wanted, and I'll be interested to see if they can get something out of him at this point. Any interest in the San Francisco receiving corps? A little talk about Brandon Ayuk, maybe moving into the Emmanuel Sanders role. Not a hell of a lot else there with Deebo Samuel out early. Not a pass-heavy offense. I haven't been investing heavily in anyone in that passing attack not named George Kittle. I don't know if anyone else has. I just can't get real excited about Deebo Samuel, not knowing how long he'll be back. I think the price is still too high. And Ayuk, I see him going a lot, and I feel like his price is too high too. So looking at the ADP on him, it just seems a little odd that we always get excited about the players. And maybe we should be a little less excited about the player and a little more excited, or a little less excited about the players in this offense. Deebo Samuel, 804. I mean, is that a fair price for a guy that could miss half the season? We'll have to see where that plays out. Ayuk is going at 1207. I mean, it's not like a prohibitive cost. Yeah, Greg Link. I 12th round. I mean, I guess that's not ridiculous, and I guess there's a lot of guys in that range that I could get in on. Look at Emil Kadlec lives again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
God, I fixed it I didn't crash the computer again.
That's amazing. But I think everyone seems to agree that the Ayuk in the 12th is pretty fair value, a pretty fair stab. I'm with you. I'm with Kurt, man. Foot injuries suck. Those Jones fractures are hard to get over. Just had the surgery in June. I don't know, man. Makes me nervous. Emil, we were talking a little bit about the San Francisco backfield while you were in shutdown mode. Just your thoughts. McKinnon coming on, drawing with rave reviews. You can get him in the 14th round, maybe. Tevin Coleman, 7th, 8th round. Raheem Mostert, a little earlier about the 5th. The talk this week is nobody knows if Mostert's going to be the starter.
It's an interesting one. I think I'm excited about Mostert because of what we saw at the end. But, again, logic tells you that Coleman's a great value, and maybe I've got Mostert rated a little high. And, of course, McKinnon, again, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for late players who have potential to be a, running back 3 or a flex player that you can get that late. And obviously McKinnon is very late. I think somebody said the 14th round, or you just said it. So those are the kind of guys you're looking at, and you should pile up the list of whatever you would call those valued players, sleepers, bold picks, last player taken. And, again, that's why I like deep rosters in leagues. I hate it in leagues where you got 14 or 15 or 16. I like rosters of 18 to 20.
So this is why Kurt is such a smart player, right? And why he's asking the questions he asks. We're and the words in his questions could be a league winner, right? We're looking for league winners. And those are the kind of guys, every year somebody wins you a league that probably you didn't even draft, right? You're going to pick up a free agent. We could run down the litany of them there. It's an endless list. But we're looking for those guys and maybe, toss a dart at them, whether it's in Arizona, a lot of people like Chase Edmonds or what, just guys that have a chance. I like Joshua Kelly. I think maybe he can move into that Melvin Gordon role and be a big scoring threat, and he's dirt cheap. So we're all looking for those guys, and maybe McKinnon can be one of those guys, if not a league winner, a guy that can help get you there. Grant Groves asks Evan Ingram's future upside in Dynasty. It's maybe a little better than I thought. I was hearing earlier this offseason that maybe the Giants were interested in moving on from him. They did not. Look, he's been remarkable whenever he's on the field. This is a thing for tight ends, and my injury agnosticity crushes me because I always don't care about injuries, and at tight end they seem to matter. I'd like to see him get through a full season, but is that worth holding him on a dynasty team to find out? Yeah, I think it is.
Well, just looking at his weekly data last week, week 1 at Dallas, 28 fantasy points PPR, 10 against Buffalo, 23 at Tampa Bay, then he did 9 Washington, 10 Minnesota, didn't do anything at New England, got 1 point at Arizona, 14 at Detroit, 11 at Dallas, and then gone to injury.
How does a tight end only get 1 point?
One
Against
catch,
Arizona? What the hell?
1 catch for 5 yards.
So, interesting, good question from Bloom and Cookie. How deep are your drafts if you want Coleman and McKinnon? They're pretty deep. I mean, in the average best ball draft, you're looking at 20 rounds or so. So, we're playing pretty deep. Look, I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm in a dynasty league right now. It's a 32-team league, 2 copies of each player, full IDP. We're drafting 50 rounds. So, yeah. In that league, Jerick McKinnon and Tevin Coleman are like gold, man. They went 20 rounds ago. So, yeah.
The other thing to recognize is depending on your roster lengths, you're not going to get some of those guys if you have a 15 or 16-man roster. But it's important, and high-quality managers always have a list of guys that they're ready to jump on, and they always have a guy or two on their roster that they're ready to cut. And be prepared if you Monday morning, Tuesday morning, assuming you can't put bids in on over the weekend, you need to be ready to see, this guy has showed up, and you have to have the guy ready that you want to cut and plan that ahead, because that's, if you have a short roster, you need to be really observant of what's going on.
So there you have that.
I don't know. Another one that you pointed out earlier that I forgot to mention. There was a guy who won the Fantasy Football World Championship about 4 years ago. And as Kurt mentioned, there's 20-man rosters. In his final roster in the championship, he had 4 or 5 of his originally drafted players. Just 4 or 5 out of 20, and he beat 400 plus other people. So that guy made some moves in free agency.
All right, guys, we've been running about an hour. The questions seem to have run shy, so maybe we'll cut this one off, and we'll be back again. If you haven't seen the schedule, we're planning to do these Ask Me Anythings, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at this time. If there are other times, feel free to put in the chat if you prefer evenings or something. We can work some more in. We've been doing best ball, or we'll be doing drafts, mock drafts on Tuesday and Thursday in the evening, 8 p.m. Eastern time. For some of you, maybe that's a better time to do the Ask Me Anything sessions. Let us know here in the chat, and we'll maybe try to set up some nights where we get onto that and can get a little more interaction. But that's one of the goals. There's no games this summer, no preseason games, and so we have some time to sit here and shoot the breeze with you guys, and it's fun to do. And you guys are pretty much as smart as us. One of the things that, Emil and I have learned over the years is we're not the experts. Our job is making you the experts, right? And you guys do that really well. You guys are all sharp cookies. So we hope you're hitting up the website. If you're not familiar with us, footballdiehards.com, go to footballdiehards.com/free trial, take a tour, see what you like. Then when you're ready to buy, it's $24 for the season. Use the promo code Diehards to get 15% off that. And we'll have a ton of stuff throughout the season, including our My Fantasy GM, an amazing tool Emil has created. It marries your roster information with our technology, our rankings, and helps you. It saves you a lot of time in managing your team and gives you the edge over the competition. That's what we're all looking for, right? Like, I'm in 30 leagues, 30 redraft leagues, and the Dynasty as well. Man, I'm going to be able to pull in all my leagues across all the commissioner platforms, My Fantasy League, NFL.com, ESPN, Yahoo, Sleeper, you name it. We've got it in there. Just 30, Kurt. I know, it's horrible. I'm a slacker. And that's not best balls, though. Best balls is another 50. But you bring all that information in, and you can assess your roster, your opponent's roster, get the jump on free agent moves, optimize lineups, tons of great stuff. So we hope you check all that out. And those of you guys who are familiar with us on Sirius, listen to us on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. The Football Diehards show is on Friday and Monday night, Saturday and Sunday night. Also, you can catch us on NFL Radio Saturday nights, 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. So hit us up, man. And we'll look for you here. Watch for the email notifications on this. We'll be here 5 days a week. Well, 3 days and 2 nights a week. And let us know. Give us a little feedback on what you want to see, what you want to hear, what you need to know. and how we can do this better, because, man, that's what we want to do. We got to take care of you. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Appreciate the feedback and the time.